evening, Bermuda. Well, tonight happened. Bermuda will be heading to the polls for a general election on February 18th. Tonight, I am joined by commentator and climate activist William Kemble, Media Maya, and my fellow Bermuda Youth Connect co-founder, Teray Tall. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Let's get to it. First, I would like to start off with all of you guys' initial reactions. What are your initial reactions to the news of this election being called? And I would like to first start with Maya.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. So I think my initial reaction is we knew it was definitely going to become a general election. Did we think it was going to happen this soon, though? For me, I was actually shocked to figure out that it was happening this soon. But when you think about, different strategies and how, the last general election, even around the pandemic, like things are definitely thought of and thought through when it comes to timelines and dates when they want to push these things out. So it's not as shocking once you sit back and think about it, but it still did come to me quite like, oh, that was fast, right into the new year.
What about you, William? What are your thoughts and initial reactions?
Certainly, I share some degree of Maya's shock around the timing. I think it's certainly indicative as well as the 2020 election was that anyone who is discounting the political expediency and strategy of the PLP is still in for a shock. And I think this is a very, very interesting time to call the election on February 18th as well. And as well, the quick time and turnaround we now have between the announcement and the polling certainly throws a few interesting wrenches into the mix with respect to the opposition.
Yeah. I mean, Maya said it's shocking, but it's also like not shocking, but it's disappointing as well. Particularly when we think about young people who won't be on island to vote if they're in like a regular school term. For the viewers, nomination day is January 21st, and the actual election is on February 18th. So not a lot of time, honestly, and very, very disappointing. Okay, not 21st, 31st, but very disappointing because young people are just not going to be able to participate in ways that they would if it was summer.
I personally don't have much to add. I think everything that's been said is shared amongst the general public. I had a conversation with my younger brother this evening, who is 18 years old in college, and like myself, he's always looked forward to voting, and he's currently disheartened that he's about to go away to school and it's not feasible for him to come back and, exercise his civic duty and vote. I think, just everybody's kind of on the same page in terms of either shock or feeling a bit disappointed or surprised or not surprised. I think, it's just shared amongst everybody.
Yeah, and I think that was reflected in the mood. When the premier announced that an election was coming, there was silence, and he said, "You can clap for that," and then people clapped. So the initial reaction was very eerie and very low, and I think that is going to be reflected in the public. I know in the youth particularly.
That's actually a cool thing to note it, actually, when you were looking at the press conference in itself, because I was like, I'm sure everyone who was tapped in was tapped in. And again, you hear first the premier listing out all the things that the PLP government has currently done, and then kind of like anyone in the audience, like we're waiting for those reactions for some things. And I don't know if that's just become an ordinary mundane thing to just listen and just take it all in versus actually giving like a very right there immediate response. Because you're right, he did have to be like, is no one happy about this? Like, audience, like, are you here with me at this moment? So that might actually tell just a little bit of how, this whole entire general election process might actually be going on. Like, are people going to be as tapped in and listening exactly what's going on to have their reactions as they happen in that moment? So that's actually quite a good thing to spot there.
And as well, it's interesting at this time that the election has been called. It does give the OBA, the FDM, and the independents to a short notice, basically, to arrange themselves. And we will see as well whether the OBA in particular follows through with their pledge to field 36 candidates this time, as opposed to 31 in the 2020 election, or if there's some consideration now and scrambling between the groups for strategic voting in certain contestable constituencies.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, it's just so interesting because in my opinion, the PLP is very performative with, their uniformity in terms of how they come dressed in their green. And I just found it very telling of how different every individual looked in terms of support of this announcement. Some people were dressed, smart casual, some people were in suits. There wasn't like, the usual PLP display of what how their press conferences normally go. And I just think that that's telling of the haste of how this election was called. I don't know if anybody else shares those same thoughts, but I took notice of that and I thought that that was very interesting.
Yeah, there were a lot of memeable moments during that press conference. I remember looking at the expressions, the responses, which is to be expected when something of this magnitude happens, but it was very interesting. Jadea Spencer is in the comments, and she says, it's unfortunate that this election was called shortly after students flew back to universities after Christmas break. Thoughts?
Agree.
Will?
Yes.
No, I definitely agree. I mean, I touched on that a few moments ago, like with my siblings, and I mean, if in a real world, it would be nice to have our students fly back, but nobody's really in that type of financial capability to just book a flight at this, how last minute it is to come and vote and just be here for about a day. So unfortunately, we're not going to really see much of a representation of that 18 to 24 vote because majority of our young people within that age bracket are currently abroad in school or living abroad.
Mm, yeah. Will, you were going to say something?
Agreed. And Jadea's comment as well is very timely. Jadea, if we'll recall, very early in 2024, when we were thinking about the upcoming election, had a very public call for imposition of absentee ballots to allow and facilitate greater democratic participation among young people and Bermudians living abroad who might be disincentivized from participating in the political process here. So it is an interesting call and potentially as well very strategic on the part of the PLP. And again, we will see for all of those voters that are here on February 18th how the chips will fall.
Yeah. Maya, you wanted to add?
Yeah, I actually want to ask you, Tui, because I know that you were out there with the premier when he came to visit the students. And just so people get a general number for those who are tapped in and listening right now, like how many students just there in the UK actually showed up to that? Can you give like a range of how many would have possibly came back and actually voted if they could?
Well, there were a lot of people in the building. Like it was a well-attended event. I would say maybe, if not over 100, definitely just closely under. So, and those are just the people who could just travel to London, who were in the UK. Like there's Canada, there's the US, there's other places where people are studying. So it's a really big part of the population. And we're talking about Bermuda, right? Which we have an aging population. So it's just insane to me that a country that acknowledges this as a problem is very keen on ignoring the youth, either deliberately or strategically. I take offense, and it rubs me the wrong way when people are like, oh, this is very politically intelligent, this is so strategic. And I'm like, strategic for what purpose? Like, to me, this is a mockery of, in some senses, the roots of the Progressive Labour Party. It was a very youth-centered movement. Like young people were the heart of the party, and like to see that be completely shifted, whether it's Taj Donville Outerbridge writing an article talking about how during his time as a chairman of the Progressive Minds, he felt very like he wasn't heard. Like whether it's that or whether it's them calling an election when students are abroad, it's just very clear that the youth are not prioritized. And we spoke to the premier on Monday. We literally spoke to him on Monday, and the vibes were definitely off. We noticed it. But did we expect this after we were asked to talk about a pre-budget report? No. So disappointed, and I'm not going to applaud this as political expediency. I think it's the reason that people have low levels of trust in government right now.
I kind of want to shift the focus on to how do we feel about the other parties right now? Like, how do we expect them to react now that they know the day that it's going to happen and how they have to prepare for it? I mean, the OBA has been saying they could call it tomorrow. We're ready. Here's the time to actually put that proof into action, right? How ready are you? Because now it's here and it's going to be just a little over a month before it's actually election day. That is a fast timeline, and I'm curious to see how the rest of the parties are going to react to it. Do you guys think there's going to be press conferences coming out back to back now, on people's doorsteps, people showing up on social media now and saying what they're going to say, or making new pages because they don't have Instagram yet or Twitter or TikTok or something like that? So what are you guys thinking?
I mean, it's the election's called, so I think everybody's going to put their best foot forward and be at the doorsteps, be all over social media, engaging in conversation and trying to win the vote of their constituents. That's normally what happens. It's dormancy for about 3 to 4 years, and then the year leading up or the weeks leading up, that's when the activity starts to have a come up. And that is the usual cycle that we expect.
Yeah, I think that's a terrible cycle, though, to expect. Go ahead, William.
Oh, sorry. It's interesting as well to see. So we've had announcement of the OBA platform late last year, but as well the announcement tonight that the POP's platform will be aired just after nomination day on the 31st of January. That too gives a very short turnaround time for anyone to have any sort of response leading up to the election, and certainly gives a lot of time as well for further strategic considerations going into February. But to the extent that the independents and the FDM as well have a concrete idea of what their election strategy will be, that's something where we still don't necessarily have a clear idea, at least in the public sphere.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a really important consideration that voters make before choosing who to vote for. And I guess a question for you guys, because we're all registered voters, anyone who is not a registered voter, we're encouraging you to go and register to vote. Whether you will be on island or not, it's just something good to do. But would you know who to vote for, assuming that you were on island and casting a vote? What would your vote strategy be, if any?
I've been thinking about that all evening, and I've always been against voting in terms of party. I know it's a big culture within a lot of Bermudian families that you vote for a particular party, but for me, I always vote individually. So I always look at the person that will best represent me, despite their party affiliation. Um, because, like, at the end of the day, I have to be able to trust you to either hear me out or listen to me or give me opportunities to have and facilitate conversations or actually be an active member within our constituency. So I look at things in terms of in an individual way. And then secondly, I think that party as a government, like which party would be a best representation of our island in the terms of the international stage is something I do take into consideration, but I try to look at it in a more individual context.
Okay. William, would you know? Maya, would you know?
I could.
Deep sighs, right?
Yeah, it would be based similarly on Ajay's point of the person again representing myself in the constituency. I have the honor and the blessing and the concern of being in a constituency that has been in recent news as well, and is a very interesting political flashpoint, in that being C9 in Smith's West, where we will have the competition between now OBA's Vance Campbell and the new chairman of the Progressive Minds group, Shamari Talbot Woolridge, representing the PLP. So we have a very interesting decision before us. And again, my decision will be made upon individuals and on who I feel will be best for the people of Bermuda. And those as well come down to ambition and priority and means to which that end of a better Bermuda is achieved.
I was C9 in the last general election, William. So I do recall, obviously it's such a shift now because of, the new switching party floors and new people coming into the spots and taking the seats. So that's interesting indeed. So I am excited actually to see what's going to happen there in that parish dismiss. But as for me, and I get what Ajay is saying, because I truly do feel in aspects you should be focusing on the person that's actually going to be doing the things for you and your community right there and then, who you feel like you can call on easily, ring up the numbers, be like, hey, you're my MP, so this is the issue that I have within the constituency. I should feel comfortable doing that with the person who's going to be in that seat, and someone that I feel that is vocal enough to actually bring those issues to the next step up, and not someone who will just write it down in a book and close it and forget it. Those are the things that I kind of try to look for in terms of voting. And there's something else I was going to mention just about the whole process in itself, but I can't recall it right now. But it is a difficult decision when you don't read into everyone's policies. So that's the only way that you could really find it to be if it's there, if you could read everyone's policies and it aligns with your own morals and ethics, that should help you clear it up a lot. But hopefully people like Bermuda Youth Connect, myself, for news, and all the other news outlets kind of help everyone understand what each and every platform is about and what benefits you best and your community best. So
yeah, that's definitely something that we can do as an organization, but something that parties should be doing is releasing their platforms in reasonable time. The PLP releasing their platform on January 31st is insanely too late. It should come earlier. And if we recall in 2020, the FDM released their platform about a week before the election as a new party that people have limited information about. So I think that not only do organizations like Bermuda Youth Connect, the Daily Hour, Burn News, Royal Gazette, all the media, yes, we can dissect platforms, but political parties have a responsibility to do their due diligence and release it in good time.
And I think certainly your media organizations all do a fantastic job too of staying on top of these issues and in continuing the public discussion and communications around them. So again, shout out and big thanks to Bermuda Youth Connect for putting this on, for Media Maya and the Daily Hour for participating, for Burn News in putting this on, and the RG too. We have a little over a month, and there's going to be a lot of communications. So again, tuned in and await all of your further takes on it leading up to it.
Yeah, I thought this was really
Definitely
cute.
gonna be overwhelming.
Mark Arthur C. Phillips says maybe it would be a good idea for Bermuda Air to offer a seat sale to allow people to come back home. What do we think?
Nice.
I mean, he just gave them a really good idea, but that's actually that's quite something. That'll be something that they hop on that, but
Yeah, and it's also
Good
not
idea.
entirely precedented because during COVID, they chartered flights from all over to bring students back home for health and safety reasons. It was a pandemic, obviously, but civic responsibility is also a really big deal of national importance. So we shall see. Charles H. Jeffers II says, isn't there an independent candidate in C9? Yes, it's Dwight Jackson, right? So it's Dwight Jackson, Vic Ball, and Shamori Talbot Woolridge who are running in C9.
Like, not
Vance Campbell.
Vance
Vance
Campbell.
Campbell.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
oh, right, oh, right, oh, right. Does anyone want to explain that debacle of how that came to be?
I mean, I did a whole thing on my page. You can definitely go look at it as I compared them. If I was watching right now, I compared them to like Marvel Civil War, if you ever watched it. But in the simplest way possible to explain it is that, yes, Vance Campbell won it when he was a PLP member against Big Bull in the 2020 general election. But then when he switched party lines, the party the leader, Jan Richardson, kind of just made it be that way. Like, okay, it's Vance Campbell's seat, it's going to stay Vance Campbell's seat. And then Big Bull tried to, test it and let them know, like, hey, I'm going to get these signatures. We should actually have an internal vote on this. But then they did not. And then there was more disagreeable within the party. And then it kind of just clashed more and more. And then Jan Richardson basically said, Big Bull, you're out completely. And Vance Campbell is in the seat. And throughout the whole entire just conversations on it, Vance Campbell never made any comment at all. You heard a lot from Big Bull. He came on to the Daily Hour as well. He also just, made it known to different news outlets who approached him after they found out more information as well. So he said his side of the story. And Jan Richardson also explained some of the issues in which himself and the party had with Big Bull not really complying to what he needed to do within the OBA, like different things that each and every MP has to tick off. He wasn't doing them, according to Jan Richardson. So that was also another reason why they had to just dismiss him from the party. So that was really what went down there when it came to this too.
Yeah, and did we hear anything from Leader of the Opposition, Jan Richardson, after Vic Ball went on the Daily Hour?
No, I sent an email asking, for any comment or anything to clear up some questions, and it was basically, we're no longer discussing it. It's an internal matter type thing, and that was that.
Well, that's disappointing.
No, he felt like he said everything he needed to say on the situation.
So I just wanted to shift gears a little bit. I thought an interesting topic for us to kind of dive deep into is talking about a lot of the cultural behaviors of politicians in this election season. And I've spoken to a lot of young people who have experienced this, and I've experienced it myself, especially when it comes to this election season. When candidates come to your doorstep, they only want to talk to the head of the house and no other young voters that are in the house. I've had that happen many times of different candidates come to my doorstep and they will only talk to my parents, but they will never ask if there's any other registered voters in the household. I don't know if anybody else has experienced that, but I have spoken to other young people who have had that experience as well.
Yeah, I mean, young people are definitely neglected. There's no ifs, ands, and about it. Charles H. Jeffers II is in the comments, and he says, can we make absentee ballots an election issue for this election? This should be the last election without them. Agreed. Literally agreed. It's just, maybe we don't really know who to advocate to, because it seems like unless the parliamentarians themselves care enough, it doesn't get mentioned. For example, abortion. We were talking about abortion since 2020, and it's only recently become salient in 2024 after Senator Hodgson brought it to the House, which is great. Very grateful for it. But at what point do we say, okay, these are just issues that the electorate cares about, and that should be enough? Because you represent us, not the other way around.
Hmm. Well, guys, I want to be able to talk more, but I have to go now. But thank you for starting up this conversation, because it's going to be a long one all the way until February the 18th. And even past that as well, as we continue to go into the new year for Bermuda, looking into 2025 and beyond. And now I feel like when it comes to even youth votes right now, I mean, we're all getting older as well. And the younger generations is 18 and up. Like, I know my cousin who just turned 19 now, and they are more than excited to vote. They have really messaged me, just like really like putting into the pavement, wanting to like be out there and make their voice heard throughout this election. So just wishing well to anyone else out there who's trying to make their voice heard as well throughout this process. All right.
Yeah.
See you guys later.
Bye, Maya.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Maya.
William, do you have any final words?
I do. And following in stage left, Maya as well. Absolutely grateful now to know where we stand in terms of the election going forward, and share the sentiment as well for wishing to encourage as great civic and political participation with this process as much as possible, and any more that can be facilitated. I think that we did have a good idea aired, and thank you very much as well for the suggestion on Bermuda Air potentially chartering a flight. I do have a sister as well who'd be very keen to come back and vote. And I'm sure, again, there are many hundreds of other Bermudians in the diaspora around the world who'd be very, very willing to get involved further too. But further to that, I look forward very much to the following commentary from the OBA, the FDM, and the independents. I look forward very much to the announcement of the party platform after the 31st of January from the PLP, and wish all candidates the very best of luck and in presenting their case. And look forward as well to Bermuda's decision on the 19th of February. And thank you again to Bermuda Youth Connect and to Burn News as well for putting this on. And to Media Maya.
Then there were two.
And then there were two. How do you feel? Because I initially thought back to 2020 of how we were very energized in making a change. But right now, I think I just feel a little deflated.
A little bit. I think a lot of people feel that way, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if a repeat of what happened in the 2020 election happened in this election with a low voter turnout. Um, um, I also feel like a lot of people, even though we knew an election was bound to happen sometime this year, I don't think a lot of people felt that it was going to happen this soon. So when we spoke to feeling informed on whether or not we knew how to vote, I think a lot of people feel uninformed. And I feel the same way.
Yeah, okay. If you feel like that, then with all of your work in Bermuda Youth Connect and the National Youth Policy, then I think that's cause for concern.
All I know is showing up on election day to vote will happen, and it's very important.
You're taking the day off, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, it is very important. And it's important to us, but it should also be made available by the leadership, right? Like, we shouldn't have to fly back home to vote. We should be a consideration in their decision-making process. So it's a little disappointing, but do you think there's a reason for hope?
There's always a reason for hope. And I think at the end of the day, we're a strong community and we'll band together, even despite whoever our government will be after February 18th, we're still going to be here and we're still going to have to roll with the punches either way. So I think I don't really feel defeated in that sense.
Okay, yeah, I like that. Because there's also this thing of like, if we have less time, then perhaps there's going to be more opportunity for collaboration or more opportunity to put pressure. I think Mr. Gary Foster Skeleton asked the premier if he would be open to debating, and his response was, "We'll see what happens after nomination day," which I don't know what that indicates.
All I know is that I think a debate should definitely happen. And oh, before I forget, I forgot to check my poll. I did a poll on my Instagram page asking what people's thoughts were on a potential debate. So I'm at 91%. So out of 40 responses, 91% of people said that they would tune in to a debate and they think that it should happen. And I think that's a standard practice for democratic, practices that, debates really showcase true leadership, true knowledge, and also just, it really informs the electorate on how to move forward with casting their votes. I just think that that's a standard practice in all democratic processes, that a debate should just happen.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. It should just happen for both the voters, but also for politicians. Like, debates are critical moments for swing voters, for people who are on the fence, and even for staunch partisans, for people who are like diehard OBA, diehard PLP, diehard FDM. Like, regardless of wherever you stand, there's points to be gained and lost in a debate. So I feel like in 2020, I know we came with this narrative that debate should happen for democratic processes, and that's absolutely true. But politicians can also benefit. They can pick up votes. They can also lose them, depending on performance, et cetera, et cetera. But it's also an opportunity for them to benefit. So I hope it happens. I really do. I think there's some energy and there's some momentum behind the calls for a debate.
Mhm.
And there's not a lot of time for them to be sustained. So I guess I hope it will work. But
I
I
mean,
would have
we've
loved to do one in person. And maybe it
definitely,
will happen, but we'll see.
we've definitely been applying pressure on that since 2020.
Mm.
We first ever pre-election leaders forum that we hosted in the 2020 election. That was very well received, very successful. But I would love to see something like that happen, but definitely at a larger scale.
Yeah, yeah, definitely would.
Let's see if
Do
we
you
can get them
remember?
all together.
Do you remember like traveling on our bikes to voting polling booths and talking to people and talking to
And
politicians? I think
yes,
that's why I feel defeated, because that was so much fun. Like, that was a lot of
yeah.
fun. I really enjoyed that, and it's just a shame that um, most young Bermudians, if they don't have the opportunity to fly back, if they can't be flown up by some company, some partnership, that they won't have the opportunity to not only vote, but be around that election energy. Because it can be a place for conniving and strategy or whatever, but it's also a nice opportunity for community connection, to feel a part of a group while you're abroad in school, to reconnect to Bermuda, to become a part of like some decision making process, and you see it as a part of your home. So it's a real missed opportunity. I mean, earlier we discussed that like it's strategic for the PLP to do this, but I really do think it's a missed opportunity for some much needed PR, good PR,
Definitely.
but also much needed engagement.
Yeah, and if there are any political candidates listening to us right now, I did speak to it earlier, but if I could encourage all of you in this election cycle to please don't take our young voters for granted and actually hear them out. Because I find that many politicians can be out of touch when it comes to handling youth issues, and the only way you can really be informed is hearing it straight from us as young people, and you should definitely take the time to hear your young constituents.
Yeah. Also, like, think about all the young people who've been rolled out, like Shamori Talbot Ward, Ariana Hodgson. I'm curious to know, like, I'd really be curious to know their thoughts about this, because as a young person in the party, I wonder if they had any say, any influence, because to me, this is a clear signal that we are not as interested in the youth vote. And that would disappoint me as a candidate in the PLP or the OBA.
Definitely. I think as young people, they would inherently share some similar sentiments to
Mm.
what we have discussed. But it's going to be an interesting election, and honestly, I'm overwhelmed. I'm really overwhelmed. When we got the notification that this was going to happen today, I was just immediately overwhelmed. And was just processing what these next 6 weeks leading up to February 18th will look like.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you feel overwhelmed. Rakaya Simmons-Landy feels underwhelmed. I think I think she's like alluding to the fact that there's just been so much, and this is honestly just a disappointment. So I think I'm more so feeling how Rakaya's feeling, like very defeated, very deflated, because I thought we were making progress. Joe Marr says, "Good evening. I feel it's unfortunate that students who are off island and can't vote. It's unfair and strategic. A debate will be a good thing for the country to hear all sides." Absolutely. Christopher Bean says, maybe hosting a discussion, allowing the young candidates to share their platform and ideas. Excellent. I mean, Bermuda Youth Connect is always open to doing those things. And that would be great, I think, pre-election. But I think something I wanted to say is like a debate or some form of discussion will happen because Bermuda Youth Connect will definitely push to make it happen. So whether that's virtual, whether that's in person, whether it's hybrid, know that like there's definitely going to be some movements on our end. And Ajay, I know initially I asked you if you have any reasons to feel hopeful, but I think that gives me hope. Knowing how hard we're going to work to continue existing and pushing for what we want, I think that gives me hope because I have confidence in our agency.
Definitely. Well, here we are.
Here we are. One more thing from Rakaya. You want to read it?
Rakaya said, I think they do take the time to listen to us on occasion. The issue for me is that they do not action any, if not most of their promises. That's true. I recall going to multiple youth discussions, nothing yet.
Yeah,
And I
that is
think another
true.
important point is that they do listen, but they only listen to a select few people. And I
Oh,
know that
really?
we've run into this issue many times that when it comes to consulting with young people, they always consult the same young people. They don't actually go out and consult or speak to other diverse groups of young people. If you ask me a question, I can only speak to my inherent lived experience. I can't speak to the other masses of young people. Like I can't relate to what my 18-year-old brother is going through in his life because
Yeah.
I'm way out of touch with that.
Yeah. What would good civic engagement with young people look like then? Because if young people are like in the pursuit of education, you know, some of them may not be civically engaged. I don't know how youth parliament is operating now, if it is at all, but in like an ideal sense, what would it look like?
I think it should be an open opportunity to all voices. Because even with youth parliament, for instance, I'm just going to use that as an example. I felt like at least when we were in youth parliament, it was like the same kind of young people there. We
Mm-hmm.
were politically inclined, we were engaged and everything like that. And at least how I got into youth parliament, I was involved in debate, and then my teacher had told me about youth parliament and referred me. But other people do not have access to those kinds of opportunities. So I think it first starts with evaluating the inequity of opportunity and
Mm.
then addressing that and then finding ways to weave other opportunities in for people and meeting young people where they are. So, we have to be honest, some young people are just simply not interested in civic
Yeah.
engagement or politics and all of that. Some people, football is their life, art is their life. But
Mm-hmm.
guess what? All of that stuff is connected. And finding ways to connect everybody's art form and interest is also another layer to it as well.
Yeah. I like what you said about meeting young people where they are because that puts the onus on the government to do it, but also gives young people enough agency to respond. And you're right. I think I went to youth parliament because, like, I think like one of my friends was like, "Oh, I'm going to youth parliament. Do you want to come?" And I was like, "Sure." And then I liked it and never left. So I think it was definitely like a social gig. But I think it also speaks to this broader thing in Bermuda where people feel like the community is fragmented or has suffered a lot of loss. Over the past couple of years. And I think we have to engage with that reality, right? Like if young people are disengaged, they learned that from somewhere or there are no opportunities to engage. So I really like what you said about meeting young people where they are. Are there any lessons that you have from 2020 to now? Like thinking back about what we did as Bermuda Youth Connect, like what have you learned since then and you're taking with you into this next election
Oh,
cycle?
I think definitely what I learned was persistence is key. Because if you saw, we were working each other like horses. We were so persistent. Because just to think, I think it wasn't even 6 weeks. I think we pulled everything together in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks. And just the
Hmm.
outcome and what came into fruition was just like looking back and reflecting was so big, like beyond what we thought it would actually be. And, we didn't have them all in the same room, but to even just have them to agree to come and speak was just big in itself. But I
Yeah.
want them all in the same room. That's the key.
Yeah, that is the key. That definitely is the key. And to be honest, it very well may happen. Like you said before, public sentiment is very clear. They want a debate to happen, and we think it should happen. So perhaps it will. I mean, let's see. We're gonna keep persistent, as you said. That's a lesson that you took, and I also would agree with it. I think we have to keep being persistent. But now that we know more, because we've been in this space for a while, I think we can be a bit more strategic. In 2020, we were just like young people back from home on a pandemic, and we wanted to civically engage, and we did that. But now we've kind of been around for a while, we've made connections, and I think that we can continue it, and I'm excited to see. Yeah, I think Veronica she's in the comments, and she says, I'm proud. I like that, because I'm also proud. She says, in 2020 we were questioned and told that we wouldn't last long as an org by candidates running, and we are still here, round 2. Okay, period.
I know I'm ready for round 2.
Collage Simon says, hi, I am a current youth parliamentarian. Hi, Collage. And we are in the process of piloting initiatives to engage with students at their respective institutions. Very happy to hear that. And congrats, all the best. If you need help, reach out. We're on Instagram, Twitter, wherever you are. We're on all socials. I Never Res says, Alexander Abbott, I find that there are a lot of young people. I find that there are a lot of young people who are simply not interested in politics. True. But why? We have to get curious about these things.
I slightly disagree because, in terms of party politics, yes. But I feel like every issue that you have an opinion about is somewhat linked to politics because at the end of the day, the government is affecting us in other ways unseen. So, if I'm a young person and I'm struggling to find an apartment and I'm struggling to make ends meet and I'm unemployed, those opinions that I have are linked to politics.
Yeah.
So I think young people are in tune with social issues and things going on in the community, but we just have no time for party politics. I think that's what it is, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think you guys are saying similar things, right? Like what I got from that was that young people are not interested in politics, but not because they are apathetic or have withdrawn, but because they don't see themselves represented. They haven't made those connections that Ajay just talked about to connect, their art interest or their international business interest to politics because they don't have the language to do that. And I think that's where adults, first like the family, and then school comes into play and arms them with knowledge to be able to make those connections. So I think, yes, I don't think anyone would disagree and say that young people are disengaged, but look at the fact that this election was just called when young people are going to be in school. Young people are disengaged, but also young people are actively being removed from the political process and carved out of it. So I think it's both things. I think you're both saying very similar things, but there's hope. Somebody, Bermuda Boss Action Syndicate Sound says our voices as young people go unheard. That's why. James William Collison says, well, corruption should make people wake up. Okay, we are alive and active tonight. Crazy.
I know. Where are all the commentators from the Royal Gazette?
I think they're here,
commentators
actually.
on the Burn News.
I think they're here, to be honest. Some of these comments I'm like, ooh. Desmond Crockwell says, what issues would you like to see addressed as young people? Abortion, domestic abuse. I like to see some. Yeah, I think those are the two. That's what my intuition is saying. Abortion, domestic abuse, and the cost of living. Housing, I think, has been adequately addressed. I will say, I think the government has made okay strides on housing, though there's obviously more work to be done. Cost of living, But those two spring to mind: abortion, domestic abuse, cost of living. What about you, Aj?
I think I'm definitely in alignment with the issues that you said. And then I guess for me, on top of that, is just the timeline of the education reform and like the transition of that. I would like to see that addressed a lot. Um, I don't really want to speak too much on it, but I just think as an educator, it's really stressful, and we have to just make do with what we have, and also
Mm-hmm.
just for the best interest of our young people and our students. But I'm just personally passionate about it, just would like to see education addressed a lot more in terms of what education reform is going to look like in the transition in the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, that's very valid. That's very valid. And I know a lot of people definitely agree. Um, so, yeah, that's definitely a big one. Christopher Bean says voter registration is important as well. There's a lot of young people that are currently unregistered. True.
Definitely.
Definitely true.
And
Ajay,
one thing I appreciate, oh,
you hosted
yes.
the voter
No, go ahead.
registration drive. Finish your
I
thought
did.
and then tell me about the youth response to the voter registration drive.
All right. What was I gonna say? Yes. Sorry about that. Um, I was gonna say that I'm very appreciative that the parliamentary registry has we have the ability to check your status. So you can actually
Mm,
go on the parliamentary registry website and actually check to see if you're registered. And also, if you have moved, you have to change your address. So you can do that on the website as well. So like for instance, for me, I recently moved. You cannot vote um in your constituency if you have not lived there in the last 30 days. And you can get fined. I
really?
learned that. Yes, you can get fined if you are caught voting in a constituency that you do not currently live in. So if you have moved, I definitely urge you to check your status and update that information as soon as possible. And
Mm,
then also shifting gears to the registration drive, we hosted that in August, I believe. It had a very good response. We were able to connect with many young people and other community members that day. I want to say we got just about 20 people registered, but many other people, they just wanted to check their status. So they were able to do
right.
that with us, and we showed them how to navigate the website. Um, but I also think that the parliamentary registry will be hosting like a campaign at the end of this month, which also that timing was interesting in itself. But they will be hosting a campaign to get registered to vote at the end of this month. I want to say January 22nd. But we will post that information. We'll confirm that with them and post that information on our story at some time this coming week.
Yeah. And for those looking to register to vote, the website is elections.gov.bm. That's where you would change your registration, change your address, re-register. That's the one-stop shop for you to register to vote. Elections.gov.bm. That's where you should go.
Now, Tori, are you gonna be able to fly home to vote?
Can I tell you a secret? I have never voted in an election, even in 2020. Do you know why? I mean, do you
Why?
know why? Because I live
Well,
in
because
an
you've always been away.
well, Ajay, I would fly back for this, but I'm going to tell you why. Because I live in an uncontested area.
Right. I mean, that might change this time around.
It better.
Totally forgot about that. You couldn't even vote
I couldn't
in the
even
last
vote. I
election.
I couldn't vote. Well, I mean, I could have for sure. I could have voted.
Who was your MP?
Neville Tyrrell.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, we'll see what happens in this election. But yeah, I've never voted in in a Bermudian election.
That's so unfortunate and unfair.
It is, but I get a lot of joy from this.
I mean, with the large amount of independent candidates that's been popping up, I wouldn't be surprised if there is at least one or two in every constituency. A lot of people are starting to step up to the plate, and honestly, that makes me feel that's one thing that makes me feel hopeful that there's a broader representation.
Of what? Like who's stepping up to the plate?
Well, just community members, you know, I think that
Mm,
that's a big testament because to be fair, there are a lot of candidates in certain constituencies that don't even live in that constituency. So
mhm.
at least for me, that's something that I would take into consideration. I would rather vote for somebody who lives in my constituency that is also, you know, living in the same general area and experiencing things going on within my community. So like they understand like if I have an issue, more than likely they're experiencing that issue as well. And I would assume that they will have haste to at least address it.
Yeah, I think that's a valid like assumption to make. And if I was a voter, I would be like, "Now, who are you?" You know, especially if you've lived there for your
Mhm.
entire life and you like know the people, like, and some low Joe Blow comes and says, "Vote for me." Like, it's definitely going to rub me as a voter the wrong way because I like the
Mhm.
familiar. But let's talk about candidates in each constituency. Do we think the OBA and the FDM are going to field a full 36?
I think the OPA will fill a 36. I'm not too sure about the FTM. I
Mm,
think that with the people that they do have that they would run, I think they would be strategic in terms of placing them in certain constituencies. Um, but for the OBA, definitely, I think that they would at least have a candidate in every constituency. And I would be very shocked if they don't at this rate.
well, did they in 2020? I don't think they did.
No,
They did not, right? So I
no.
wouldn't be entirely shocked if they didn't. I don't know what my like response would be to be honest at this point, but they didn't have a full slate. But they have been calling for an election, so it would be quite crazy if they've been calling for an election all while
Mhm.
being unprepared for an election. So I hope they do. The FDM, I'm not sure. You know what movement does, I think, kind of energize me? The independence, the movement of independence, whether they're connected to Sir John Swan or not. To me, that gives me hope because it's people saying, I want to be the change that I would like to see. And I've been really impressed with the caliber of candidates who've like come out. Lieutenant Cyree Bean, Dwight Jackson, who's a teacher. Like teachers just always have my utmost respect. Like I have so much love for teaching as a profession. I think it takes a very specific kind of person to be a teacher, but independence, I think that's where I'm really looking forward to seeing how that shapes up. Because if you remember in C36, Cyree Bean was identified as the biggest threat to the FDM and the OBA,
That's
and that turned out to be correct. So I think the FDM, the OBA, particularly, are going to have to be very strategic about maybe they shouldn't field a full 36 candidates. Maybe they should work collaboratively and be like, you go here, you go here, you go here. But that will
right.
require some collaboration across the board. I don't know if that's the case, but I think that would be very interesting. Like, I'm interested to see that dynamic. Where does the PLP lose seats? Because I think they'll probably lose some seats. Do I think they'll lose the election? I don't know, but I do think they'll lose some seats. And it's up to the OBA, the FDM, and the independents to see if that happens and to make that happen.
And apply that pressure.
True. Very true.
Um, we have some comments that I would like to address.
Sure, just click them.
Oh, I didn't know I could do that.
You can.
I can't do that.
Which one do you want?
Omar Dill.
Omar Dill? Okay.
Omar Dill. Can you click the previous one because I think it's all connected.
Okay, so we have a
Omar
question from
Dill.
Collage first, and then he
Yeah,
responds to
let's do
Collage.
that. All right, so Collage said, what solutions would you propose to bridge the representative gap between young people and the House, excluding facilitating forums, as that seems redundant?
Okay.
And then Omar responded to his question. To Collage's question, a firm youth policy positions and voting as a block from a youth perspective. Became the youth vote is scattered. The sitting government has not factored the youth in as a factor then will materially affect an election. Interesting thoughts.
Yeah, I
To your
think.
point about a youth policy, there is a current acting national youth policy. And part of that national youth policy does address civic engagement.
Mhm.
So there is some policy in place. And then to Collage's question, I do think facilitating conversations, I think across the board is a good start. But I think where I do agree with you is that there's no real action after those conversations. And I think
Mm,
somebody mentioned that prior, that that's where we see the redundancy, is that the conversations happen, we establish that there are issues at play, and then we don't come up with any solutions, or we come up with solutions but don't act on that.
yeah. I think this government in particular is very great at like innovation and thinking of new things to do. Like I look at the throne speech and I'm like, this is excellent. I think they have an implementation problem, which is strange because they have an obscene majority in the House. So it's either maybe like a backlog in government processes or a clear change in priorities. Because in the previous throne speech, youth featured very heavily, and then OBA candidate Sophia Tessitore kind of said, okay, the youth are absent from this current throne speech. And I remember Shamari Talbot Woodward responded and said the OBA is no person to talk about youth neglect or whatever. So I don't know. I think they're great at like ideas, but we need to follow up with action. I think that's the thing. And things like this election being called when young people are not on island is another indication that the youth are being carved out. And I know the PLP was very vocal about the UBP calling elections while young people are abroad, and now suddenly they're doing the same thing. So
And this is the second time in a row.
yeah, yeah. I mean, well, 2020 was kind of strange, right? Because everyone was home for the pandemic, but this, like this is not a choice. Like this is 100% their decision, and I really am rubbed the wrong way when people are like, "Oh, it's so strategic." It's such political expediency, and I'm like, I hate that politics has become this word that has these negative and immoral connotations, because I genuinely do think that we're inherently political animals. So to see this word just be tainted, it just really frustrates me. But there's hope, because we're gonna fight for debate and whatnot. Okay, let's see what other people are saying in the comments. Penny Saltis says, what is the youth opinion in early childhood education and its importance in the community? Ajay, do you want that one?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something important. And I think from a teacher's perspective, it's something that we're starting to definitely invest a lot in the education system. But aspect of it, I think that when we think about early childhood education, I think of daycares and nurseries, and also about how expensive it is. And a lot of parents that I've spoken to, they desperately try to get their children into government preschool because it isn't really feasible to um, pay daycare fees and then pay rent. And I think, that's why a lot of young people are considering having children later in life, because it's so stressful and the cost of living is so high. It's just so many things going on.
Yeah, I love that answer. Bermuda Boss is asking, who is the candidate for Smith's Parish? Does anyone know, or has anyone been chosen? Okay, two things. We
Well,
need you to
there's
be a bit more
multiple
specific.
constituencies.
Yeah, it's like there's
Yeah.
for each parish, it's not just one constituency, although perhaps it should be. Should we have a full 36? I don't know. But it depends on which constituency you're talking about. If you don't know, you can go to elections.gov.com or the parliamentary website and find the name of your constituency. But if you're asking when you'll find out who the candidate is, the full and confirmed date is January 31st. That's nomination day. So that's when candidates will be announced for every constituency that political party has a candidate for. So the answer to your question is TBD, to be determined. Ajay, I wanted to comment to something that you said about early childhood and development. I know that this is literally your expertise, this is your role. Is there some kind of study or some research that shows the more you invest in women, the better the world gets, the better children are? Because it just makes sense to me that if you're investing in the lives of women and increasing their quality of life, then you naturally just have a better functioning family and a healthier kids, happier kids.
I can't speak to women specifically, but I could just speak to investing in the family in general. Um, so, statistically, children in single parent households are more likely to experience adverse situations.
Mm,
So, it's all about stability and environment. So enriching the family environment, enriching the child's and ecosystem. That's kind of like the buzzword that we use in early childhood education is the child's ecosystem. Enriching in it will put them best put their best foot forward for the rest of their life.
mm. I like that. And I'm really curious to see what the FDM comes up with on like the declining birth rate situation if they address it. Because do you remember during the C36 panel,
Mhm.
former what is it? What was he? Leader of opposition, premier Mark Bean. He
Oh,
was
Mark,
like, yeah,
yes.
he was like, I believe that men have to be men and women have to be women, whatever that meant. So I'm curious to see if he addresses the declining birth rate and what that strategy would look like.
Mhm.
Um, but the reason I thought of the C36 panel is because the premier quoted Carl Neblett from C36. We asked him a question about the cost of living, and he had said something like, I have no idea. And the premier used that when he was kind of addressing the OVA and their gaps. So clearly, our events they reach the right audience.
Mhm.
But again, we're lacking on the action.
I mean, one thing that I would like to bring up, especially about the FDM, is that yes, they have a platform, but I find it very inaccessible. And
Mm.
I think that like other parties, it should be in like a one-stop shop where I should be able to just go on your website and view that. So I think that that's something that they should take into consideration for a lot of young people and just the electorate in general. That I feel like to find out basic information, I shouldn't have to dive deep into World Gazette articles or Burn News articles or recordings of interviews. I think that that should just be a document posted on a website. Just a thought.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I also think that people should like market their manifestos and
Mhm,
publish it in reasonable time so people can go through it, but also like be very honest in their manifestos. Like I know some of the things that was said during our C36 panel took people by surprise. They were like, "Oh my goodness, I didn't know this person had that thought or this person had that thought." And there's a clear disconnect between political representatives and the public insofar as we don't really know what they stand for or we only know a bit of partially what they stand for. Do you remember when you and Haley interviewed the premier like on Monday and you asked him about abortion and he said he can't have an opinion because he's the leader?
yeah.
That shocked me because I thought if anyone should have an opinion, it should be you. And Senator Hodgson was the person who kind of brought abortion to the stage. And I'm appreciative of it, although I just hate that women's issues are exclusively women's issues. Like women are meant to be the carrier and the bearer of these issues, where I feel like women pick up slack for kind of everybody. Like
Mhm.
they're championing everyone's issues, but only women are championing women's issues. So shout out to you, Senator Hodgson, but for everyone else, tighten up. And if you care about it, you should be vocal. If you don't care about it, you should be like honest about it instead of kind of like hiding behind the curtain of conservatism. Like be very honest. Um, but yeah, interesting times. Very, very interesting times.
Really is. Do we have any comments?
We do, but I don't know. I never read a saying with the election now called, how do you think young people, whether abroad or at home, can make their voices heard and play an active role in themselves or play an active role themselves?
Keep the conversation going. I mean, that's the beauty of social media, that it connects us in such a big way. So I think having an opinion, the beauty of it is that more than likely somebody else is going to agree with you or have or share the same opinion. And it makes you feel not alone and it connects you and it also sparks conversations. So I think especially during this time, I would love to see every young person just like having some Twitter fingers, being on Instagram, just sharing some thoughts, you know, or I love be controversial if you need to. Start some conversations going. Like this is the
Mm,
time to like have these conversations because I know that these politicians are going to be paying attention and tapping in as well, and also at our politicians too. at David Byrd, at Jarian Richardson, at Mark Bean. What are your thoughts on this? Like, don't be scared. You know, social media is a public platform. Use it to your benefit.
You know, on some level, I agree with you, Ajay, but I also feel like that's our problem. We only have Twitter fingers. We're
That's
only
all we
screaming
have.
in our echo chambers. Like, I definitely agree that these are the tools that young people use and are most comfortable with. But sometimes I'm just like, what next? You know, like this isn't working. So, you know, readjust, strategize. So I definitely agree with you. I think we should leverage the tools of social media, but it's clear that the older generation is unwilling or not able to engage with us. So I feel like we have to kind of up the ante a little bit, and take those Twitter fingers to some other place, like go to a public forum, go to a discussion, host one, come online with us, you know, do something other than that.
Or
But
start a
definitely
youth
continue
movement.
to do it. Yeah, or join one. How about that? How about collaborative
Exactly.
efforts?
Yeah.
How about that one?
I mean, that's what we did.
That is what we did. And we all started in youth parliament, for the record.
I know.
Ajay, Haley, Veronica, and I literally all met in youth parliament. Who else was in youth parliament? Taj Danville
Taj,
Outerbridge,
Teo,
Teo,
Sion, Ryan Parent Chief. A lot of people have been in youth parliament.
Elsie Brangman, Asia Atienza, Tyrese Coakley, Yasser Baya. Those were great times, to be honest. I mean, like,
Yeah.
it was really fun. So if you are like thinking about youth parliament, or Yassine Shentouf was there, Madison Quigg was there, tons of people, literally tons of people. It was very fun. So if you're considering
Mackenzie
youth
Cole
parliament,
Tuckett.
Mackenzie Cole Tuckett, if you're considering, just know it's very fun. You may find like your friends for life or your enemies for life, both. Kalash is saying, in order for things to be actioned in a manner that satisfies our demographic, it is critical that we stay engaged instead of averting blame as easy as it can be, whether it is intentional or not. I'm confused. How do you read that?
I think he's saying that um though the onus shouldn't be on young people to be informed in what's going on in the greater schemes, we should be like I understand. Like yeah, like the onus, even though the onus shouldn't be on young people, we are well aware of what's going on and we have the capability to be informed.
Okay, cool. Omar
No,
Dale is saying, I will suggest it again. Voting as a block is a big tool that the youth have. I've read the National Youth Document, and how many youth know what's in the document, let alone voting on it? Well, is the youth document meant to be a manifesto for young people, or meant to be outlining protections and plans forward for young people? I think it's meant to be protections, not necessarily this is what the youth believe, because young people are very much still developing their political opinions and their ideologies. Maybe they don't even have one, which is okay. So I don't know. I wouldn't say that the National Youth Policy document is meant to represent the beliefs of the young people. But Ajay knows better because she's on the board. So tell us.
the National Youth Policy is supposed to be a standard for government in terms of how to navigate working and creating initiatives and programming for young people. Um, and also like it's something that's more so also on an organizational standpoint, like a lot of youth organizations are a part of it and touch on it as well. And I think a lot of young people are known about it because I know the minister has gone around to schools showcasing the national youth policy and educating young people on it and those particular goals. But it isn't a policy for you voices, like which what you said was true, Teray. It's more so setting a standard for government in terms of how to create initiatives and how to set standards for youth work and youth programming.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense. Well, let's talk about what the youth can do. You know what I think the young people can do? I think we can learn from our elders, because whenever our elders have a problem, they're marching, they're on the house, they're on the hill, they're doing something. And I feel like we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. And that's a generational difference, right? Like we just mobilize more on social media, but it's clearly not working. So I think we have to kind of learn from our elders and take a copy out of their playbook. Because do you remember, Ajay? I can't remember when it was. Somebody was doing a starvation strike, like where they were not eating for a period of time on the Hill.
Yes, that was 2016. That was
Mm,
that was linked to the December pepper spraying incident that happened.
mm.
I think that had to do with some kind of immigration policy.
Okay, well, I'm not endorsing that type of protest. I'm not saying do that, but look at instances in Bermudian history where there has been success in advocacy and try to mirror it. I mean, and I feel kind of bad saying that because like we're in school and our time is completely divided and we should be focusing on other things, but what can we do?
Mhm. Let's see.
Actions versus words. Rakaya Simmons Landy says that was Enda Mathy. Okay, yeah, Enda Mathy. Enda Mathy, that sounds familiar. Was she in that women's group that kind of popped out during 2022? Remember that, Ajay? There was like a group of 4 women on TNN saying how they wanted to
Yes,
enter politics.
with Sophia Cannonier.
Was she on that?
Yeah.
Okay, perhaps. I can't remember, but that name sounds very familiar. Enda Mathy. Yeah, I mean, shout out to you. But I think young people can all learn from it.
Definitely.
Anyway, I think it's time to close for the night. There's about 300 people watching steady since we started. So thank you for tuning in. To close, for your information, the election has been called. The election date is February 18th and nomination day is January 31st. If you have not registered to vote, we're encouraging you to do so on elections.gov.bm or .com, either one. Just search parliamentary register in Bermuda on Google and it should come up. But thank you for tuning in. Big shout out to William Campbell from Bermuda is Love and Media Maya from Media Maya for coming in and chatting with us. And yeah, get ready, Bermuda. This is not the last time you'll see us. And have a good night. Bye.